hello everyone, it's me, Matt. Appreciate you stopping by. When you think of tank obstacles, you probably think of something like this. A trench, or maybe some, dragon's teeth, or, maybe even water obstacles. But as you can see by this particular obstacle, although very effective at stopping tanks, it's still quite capable of being able to be overcome by some of the larger main battle tanks. Not ideal, of course, because you don't want to be continually taking on trenches of this kind at this speed, because you're going to get exposed. As you can see, the belly plate's just expecting a fin round to go right through it about now. Of course, not the ideal way of navigating the obstacle, but it can be, and this is probably the little faster way of doing it, and maybe a little bit more effective. But honestly, these are obstacles that are very basic in their design, but they work very well to stop 60-ton mammoths charging towards your battle group and taking you out. And that's why natural obstacles that can be utilized with, say, a combat engineer tractor or this beautiful Kodiak, which is basically producing its own path for a battle group, are very useful. And they can take time to build and can take quite a bit of resources and protection for assets to make these. But the benefit of natural defenses such as berms and trenches is that there is an abundance of capability of using it all. There's so much around you. You have a digger and a very large vehicle that can move it all, and there you have a very large obstacle that can span large distances and doesn't require any kind of maintenance for the most part, and can just be rebuilt and restarted all over again. But unfortunately, their effectiveness doesn't work so great when the thing that created them is also something that is going to take them out from the other force. And the infantry, though, do have the capability of producing their own natural kind of defenses and taking out these kind of defenses. But when we think of obstacles with the infantry, we tend to think of barbed wire and, concertina wire, which is pretty practical. And for most tanks, these aren't really a problem. We have Mikliks that we launch, or any kind of explosive projectiles like Bangalores and things like that that can be used to take these kind of obstacles out. The problem with them is that they need to have dismounts to go set them up, and, the infantry are not useless in the fact that they can actually stop an entire armoured battle group with just a little bit of explosives. And now in this setting that we're looking at, it's mostly barbed wire to stop dismounts, but there is a very old school method that can be used to prevent tanks from moving down roads or through wood lines, and today that's what we're going to be talking about. Yes, that's right, explosive abattis, a very primitive form of obstacle that can be utilized from both infantry and armoured regiments very quickly and at a very little cost. Yes, they require explosives, but it doesn't just need explosives. You can use chainsaws, you can use just about anything to create an intertangled mesh of trees that make a huge obstacle for not only tanks or vehicles, but for infantry too. Trees, branches, sticks that come off of these kind of obstacles cause a lot of problems for infantry. I can tell you this first and foremost, going on my AGLC or my leadership course recently in the summertime here, I actually nearly lost my eye to a tree. Even with eye protection on, it's dangerous. At nighttime you can't see these things. If you walk into these kind of obstacles, it's going to cause you a lot of problems. Now, these are very old school methods of doing things. This was done for the Romans when they wanted to stop convoys of, columns of soldiers coming down roads that they had produced, or certain valleys or whatever else they had. And it works, and it's simple, and it can literally stop an entire armoured column and have to reroute them somewhere else, i.e. into a minefield or an ambush, just from knocking down some trees. Now, many of you are probably thinking, Matt, why on earth would a tree stop a tank? Why on earth would a tree stop infantry? Well, for the infantry, it's not so much as an obstacle that it is just a pain in the butt. They can get through it. It takes a little bit more time, but it's just more of a hindrance. Vehicles, however, especially those wheeled, have a very difficult time getting through overlapped heavy logs that can basically intertwine between one another and create a superstructure that can be very challenging to get through. Now, of course, when you look at these kinds of obstacles, common sense prevails as to, well, Matt, why don't we just blow them up? They were blown up to get there. Yes, for sure they can be, and there are wood structures, so they shouldn't be too difficult to blast by, but you do lose a potential ammunition set. You may lose the element of surprise. I mean, armoured columns always are quite loud anyway, but utilising explosives to get through these obstacles can be just as much of a challenge as it is to just go around them, because then you've got to dismount your troops, to lay the cord around the logs, and even then not all the logs may actually be blown up to the point where you need to get through. Some of these, superstructures that these trees overlapping can be very, very large, and using a ton of obstacle explosives to get through them may not be the best option than going around them, which deters from the battle group's plan or the commander's plan as to where they needed to go, and could, as I said, set them into ambushes. Now, one of the important weaknesses of these is the contrast to barbed wire, that it can be destroyed by fire. Literally set fire to it. It's going to take a very long time to burn, but if you're not in a massive rush, then it's not too difficult. Also, if laced together with rope instead of wire, the rope can be quite quickly destroyed with that fire, after which can be then pulled apart quickly by grappling hooks thrown from a safe distance or by using a combat engineer tractor with the blade on front. But the important advantage of the improvised abattis is that it can be formed very quickly in forested areas. This can be done simply by just cutting down rows and rows of trees that fall within their tops towards the enemy direction, and the alternative is actually to place explosives in between the trees, so that if someone is trying to push past them or create a channel through them, that it's actually rigged with explosives to make somewhat of a network of mines within inside these things that are very difficult for vehicles such as combat engineer tractors to navigate through, and infantry will just have an absolute nightmare. So they are not only a, obstruction in terms of an obstacle in its physical form, but also visually. And you can camouflage these things quite nicely with shrubberies or bushes or whatever else you want on top of them to make it very difficult to see what's actually underneath these things. Do you actually want to start pulling grappling hooks and pushing blades of dozers through these obstacles to get through the trees, when underneath them could be high levels of explosives or other deadly traps such as tank ditches beneath them that could actually engulf a tank quite quickly and get stuck in between there? So there are a lot of modern use capabilities for abattis, but they're quite rarely seen nowadays because there's more complex obstacles that can be produced. But what we're seeing more and more, especially in Eastern Europe, is that in wooded areas it's perfect. It's a quick, easy, primitive but easy system to use, and that doesn't require a ton of supplies to make them. Although they are rarely used, though, they are maintained quite heavily within the United States Army and the Marine Corps training programs. They use them heavily in what they do, and as you can see, the Canadian Armed Forces with our combat engineers have been trying to utilize them more and more in today's combat environments too. And in fact, the US Army currently instructs engineers or other constructors of such obstacles to fell trees leaving a 1 or 2 yard or 0.9 or 1.8 meter stump, in such a manner that the trees fall interlocked, pointing at 45-degree angles towards the direction of the approach of the enemy. Furthermore, it's recommended that the trees remain connected to the stumps at the length of the roadway covered by at least 80 yards or 75 meters. US military maps record that they're used in an inverted V with a short line extending from the right. There is unfortunately a disadvantage of having an abundance of resources for things like trees, that the enemy can also use them quite extensively and easily, especially if you're operating against a force that is somewhat underpowered or does not have the technological or numbers that you may expect to see on a more conventional force. And unfortunately, these kind of obstacles also produce problems for the friendly force themselves. You can't remove these obstacles as easily as, say, tank ditches that could be quickly filled in. Minefields can either be self-detonated or be plowed via your own systems quite easily. And when it comes to concertina wire, dragon's teeth, and even concrete obstacles, they can all be reduced and removed and put back into stores. But something like a huge entanglement of trees can be a huge pain in the butt if you now need to reopen those routes to save the civilian populace or infrastructure that's needed in the area, because, of course, at the end of the day, the ideal goal in a combat environment is to return the area back to the way it was, because you don't want all the roads blocked off from bloody trees all day, because that's going to cause problems for your own logistical supplies, even if you're carrying on the battle later on. So they can be actually quite difficult to clear up once you've made them, which, yes, it's not difficult. You either set fire to them or chop them up, but it takes time, manpower, and resources to do that. So as much as they are useful, they can also be quite a pain in the butt to the friendly forces that use them. Overall, though, they are a very simplistic and easy way to defend large areas of ground, especially that in woodland. And as you can see in Eastern Europe, and most of the combined training exercises are occurring, there are a lot of woodlines, say Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, etc. What I find fascinating about technology of today is that sometimes it's just not the best way to go. Minefields, concertina wire, heavy-duty structures, all these complex and highly resource-intensive obstacles are actually no much more use than a couple of bits of explosive wrapped around the base of a tree to blow up to make a entanglement of wood that stops tracked vehicles, wheeled vehicles, and even infantry. Very simple, but very effective. So there you are, folks. I hope you learned a little bit about this interesting, almost prehistoric obstacles. I'm sure dinosaurs were chopping down trees too to entrap their prey. But I hope you did enjoy the video today and learn a little bit about how, things are still being done the old-fashioned way to stop battle groups trying to get where they need to go and diverting them somewhere else. If you did enjoy today's video, please feel free to click that little thumbs up button for me there on my video. It really does help me a lot. If you want to be notified of any upcoming videos in the future, click the little bell by the subscribe button so you can get some information as to when the next video is out. Also, if you want to support my channel, you're more than welcome to go check the description box below for my Patreon and PayPal accounts, and I want to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for financially supporting me and my YouTube endeavors. It really does mean a lot. Also, I have my Facebook on there, along with my Discord and my fan mail box if you wish to go check that out. Thanks so much for stopping by again, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. All the best. Bye-bye.